Hey, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Shanae, and today I would like to talk to you about troubleshooting the most common macaron issues. I shared my first macaron recipe back in 2013, and over the years I've shared dozens of macaron recipes, and I get so many questions about troubleshooting different issues with macarons. And today I would like to talk to you about possible causes that cause these issues and how to fix them. It's not really easy to troubleshoot macarons, but I will give you different variations of the things that you need to pay attention for each different kind of issues. So I printed out all the issues here, and I will be looking at my cheat sheet here. So bear with me on this. I have gathered about a dozen problems, the most common problems, and we'll discuss it each one by one. I will put a timestamp into the video so that you can jump around between the issues, so that it will be easier for you to get back to the certain issues, and you'll get the timestamps in the description below. And I also have a visual troubleshooting guide on my website, and I will also include the link down below. So if you are a visual person, you can go ahead and check out my blog post with the pictures of the issue and the fixes. It's really easy, and if you would like, I would really appreciate it if you pin it onto your Pinterest too. So the first issue is uneven grainy top with nipples. And there are a few reasons you might get uneven shells. It's usually due to coarse almond flour. If your almond flour is coarse, I recommend to get a fine almond flour, because that way you will be able to easily sift it and you won't get bumpy shells. Also, it's really important to sift your dry ingredients really well and remove the big pieces of almond flour. That's why we sift the ingredients like 3 times. The most common reason for uneven shells, and especially if you get the nipple, is undermixed batter. You don't want to undermix your batter. The properly mixed batter, usually when you pipe your shells and then tap it, it usually should smooth out. The shells should smooth out and there shouldn't be any nipples. If the pointy end nipple gets and it doesn't fall back on, never ever touch with wet fingers to push it down, because you will get erupted macarons. So that's not a fix. If you feel like you undermixed it and it just stays there with pointy end, what you can do is you can just bake it and call it a day, or you can wipe them off and mix it a little bit more and then start over again. So the next issue is cracked macarons. And cracked macarons are caused by multiple issues. Again, there will be a lot of multiple issues that cause certain problems. So cracked macarons can possibly happen due to too much air in the batter. So when we are macaronage or mixing the batter, we are deflating the batter slightly to remove air bubbles. And maybe if the batter was undermixed, that could cause air bubbles, too much air bubbles in the batter. And also if you didn't release the air bubbles, that will cause the cracking. Another common reason is that the shells weren't rested. So what happens is when we bake macarons, the steam needs to escape the shells, and in a hot temperature, typically when you rest the macarons, it creates nice film on top, and that protects the shells from cracking, and instead the macaron shells rise up, and then the steam escapes from the bottom that creates feet. So if you don't rest the macaron shells, your macarons can crack. Another reason is that meringue is undermixed, and undermixed meringue is not strong, stable meringue, and the structure is really weak, and it doesn't develop really good macaron batter. And the last reason is too high temperature. If your oven is running a little hotter than 300 degrees, that could cause macarons to crack, because it just bursts really hot from the high temperature. So decrease your oven temperature. Even better if you get oven thermometer and accurately double check your oven temperature. And the next issue is erupted volcano-like shells. And this is typically caused, as I mentioned earlier, if you touched your macaron shells after piping with wet fingers and whatnot, that could cause that erupted volcano-like issue. The next issue is too crispy shells. They're like crispy all throughout. That means the macarons were overbaked. Now, I prefer my macarons to be overbaked than underbaked. So when in doubt, bake it a little longer, but that's a culprit. Like if you bake it too much, your macaron shells are gonna be hard and crispy all throughout, which is not ideal, but there is a fix for it. If you happen to overbake your macaron shells, you can brush on milk before putting a filling on it. So like on the bottom of the macaron shells, go ahead and brush on some milk and then pipe the filling and brush on the milk on the other side too, and then put it together. And that should be able to soften the shells after maturing for 24 hours. Another thing you could do is to use a little bit moister filling, like cream cheese, buttercream or something. That will help also soften the macarons. And after maturing, it should soften up. The next issue is, this is the very common issue. I've struggled with this at the beginning too, when I didn't know what the proper batter consistency is that flat, spread out macaron shells. And this is caused by overmixed batter. So as you mix the macaron batter, you know they tend to like get looser and very runny, right? So, or when you overmix the batter and you pipe out their shells, instead of holding their shape, they just spread out and they can like get one huge mess. But so make sure not to overmix it. Check really often so that it doesn't like run off of spatula like a liquid. So just like your batter should drip from the spatula like slowly, and you can be able to write number 8 a couple of times very slowly. The next issue is hollow macarons. It's a very, very common issue too. I actually have a dedicated video for hollow macarons because they're like, I shared 7 tips on that video, how to fix hollow macarons. I would suggest to watch that video for it. The biggest thing you want to pay attention with hollow macarons is your meringue quality and piping technique. So go watch that video for fixing hollow macarons. Okay, the next problem is no feet macarons. It's really, really common too. And signature feature of properly made the French macarons is ruffled feet, right? And when you don't have that, it's just so sad. And one of the reasons for no feet macarons is overmixed batter. If your macarons are spread out too much and whatnot, they won't have ruffled feet. Also, when the batter is too wet, like for example, if you add liquid food coloring or too much gel food coloring, or if you added like extracts or lemon juice and whatnot, when you introduce too much liquid into the batter, that causes no feet macarons. The biggest culprit for no feet is typically low oven temperature. Again, I mentioned earlier, when you put macaron shells into the oven, the macarons are cookies, right? Like they have leavening, which is meringue. And when you put it in a hot oven, macarons rise, and there's steam that needs to be escaped, and the steam escapes through the ruffled feet from the bottom because there's a nice skin on the top. So instead of going from anywhere, the steam releases from the bottom, creating that beautiful ruffled feet. So if your oven is low temperature, there's not enough heat to rise the cookies, and that's the most common problem, the most common reason for no feet is low oven temperature. So double check your oven and ensure to preheat it properly, right? For example, my oven will say that beep at me when it's reached 300 degrees, but in reality, it's 250. So make sure, give it enough time to heat the oven properly, like 30 minutes. And then I actually have a oven thermometer in my oven, so I usually go by that instead of what oven's telling me. And one last possible reason for no feed macarons is the shells were rested for too long, which weakens your meringue structure, because whenever you're using meringue for baked goods, you want to bake it right away. And when you let it rest for too long, it weakens the meringue structure and it doesn't rise your macarons. Again, it's leavening agent. For a meringue is leavening agent in the cookies. So if you don't have a good structured meringue for the shells, they won't rise. So that's another reason. The next issue is particularly not an issue for me. I don't mind this, but bulging feet. So that when the feet is like ruffled outside of the shells. Sometimes they don't, it's not my favorite, but it's at the same time, it's not end of the world. That causes due to like too high heat oven temperatures. So, and also for me personally, I get that mostly when I bake on silicone mats. I don't know what about them, but they thicker silicone mats usually cause that bulging feet for macarons. Okay, the next issue is like my least favorite issue that I encounter many times from time to time is soft and wrinkly shells. And this is caused usually due to too much moisture in the batter. It can come from ingredients like liquids, extract, food coloring, and different other ingredients like cocoa powder, which is fatty, oily ingredient, and freeze-dried fruits like strawberries, freeze-dried raspberries. They draw moisture from air really quickly, and that adds moisture into the batter. If you're new to baking macarons, I advise not to add any of those things. Work on your technique, but keep in mind those things cause excess moisture into the batter, which could potentially make your macarons wrinkly and soft. Another reason for this issue is oily almond flour. You want to check your almond flour, like grab and squeeze it in your hands, and if it forms into a dough kind of thing, that means your almond flour is oily. And to fix that, go ahead and spread it into the baking sheet and roast it in a low oven. I have shared this technique in my macaron tools and ingredients recipes video, so go ahead and check it out if you haven't already. And in that video I show how to dry your almond flour. And another reason for soft and wrinkly shells is underbeaten egg whites. The meringue is not whipped to stiff peaks, usually also cause soft and wrinkly shells. So the next issue is the batter is too thick and thickens as you mix it. It's really weird issue. I personally never had this problem, and I even tried on purpose to get that issue, and it's like really, really hard for me to recreate that problem. But the reason for that is improperly measuring the ingredients. So your ratio of wet and dry ingredients are off. So that's why I recommend make sure to use a scale for weighing your dry ingredients and even egg whites. Also, if you're aging your egg whites, that could potentially causing the issue, because when you age egg whites, it dries out the egg whites. So maybe like if you're losing excess the moisture in the egg white, that could potentially cause thick batter issue. I don't age my egg whites, so fresh eggs work perfectly for me. So pay attention to that. Another reason is too much cocoa powder can cause that, because again, cocoa powder is fatty ingredients, and oily almond flour is another reason for that. So like pay attention to those factors. Don't add too much dry ingredients. Too much cocoa powder could do that. If you're adding cocoa powder, make sure to remove some of the almond flour. Another issue with meringue is maybe meringue is overbeaten. So when you eat the meringue, they dries out, right? So when it's really like overbeaten, then meringue becomes dry meringue, and then you lose that moisture again, right? It has to be perfectly balanced. You don't want too much moisture, but at the same time you don't want too little moisture in the meringue, in the batter. The next issue is blotchy macarons. So blotchy macarons are like, you see this like oily blotches on the macaron shells. It's caused usually from oily almond flour. So like, let's say if you haven't, if everything looks great and you just have this blotchy spots, your almond flour might have been a little bit oily. Or change the different to different brand of almond flour. It depends on what kind of almond flour you're using. Some of the recipes, macaron recipes, advise to run almond flour powder sugar in a food processor before sifting. And I don't do that, and it's risky because when you're working your almond flour in a food processor, you are risking to overdo it and release the oil from the almond flour. So I don't do that. If you do that and notice your macarons are blotchy or some other issues that are caused by oily almond flour, try not processing in the food processor and see if that improves it. One time, 2 years ago, I had this like 10 batches of macarons, all of a sudden getting this wrinkly soft shells. I forgot to mention that earlier in that issue, and I couldn't realize, like, I was trying everything and I found out it was due to my almond flour. I would highly advise to use fresh almond flour, like freshly opened, or don't let the opened almond flour sit for months and then use it for macarons, because you want to use fresh ingredients. When almond flour sits around opened, they draw moisture from the air and also they get oily. So that causes a lot of these issues too. So when in doubt, open a new almond flour package or try different brand of almond flour. You can make your own almond flour, but I have no experience with it. Again, it's really risky because if you overwork your almonds, it can turn into on the way to become almond butter. So be very careful with that. The next issue is lopsided macarons. Lopsided, it's usually caused by uneven oven temperature. So like sometimes some ovens have hot spots. So like if you have a hot spot here and then low spot, like not very hot on one spot, that can cause lopsidedness. Also, if you are running on the convection setting, the fan force might be like uneven, and that can cause macarons to be lopsided. Your macaronage might be wrong, so like you haven't mixed it properly, like mixed it really well. So uneven, like in some areas there's more meringue and not mixed properly, that could cause also lopsided macarons. Another reason is piping technique. You want to pipe macarons at 90 degrees only, not, you don't want to go this way or like swirl your batter or anything. So make sure it's piped properly at 90 degrees, and that should eliminate the problem. Another issue is you might be piping way too many shells on one baking sheet, so the air circulation is off. Your macarons needs air in order to bake properly. So make sure you're not piping too many shells on one baking sheet. Also, by the way, if you don't have template, I have a template on my website. You can sign up to my email and get the template for free. I have a few different templates, so it works perfectly for baking sheets. So if you need to sign up, you can sign up on we have a link in the description. I will drop it there. Here's the last most common issue is no bottom, or the shells are stuck to the parchment paper or silicone mat, or like when the top detaches from the bottom. This is the most commonly caused by underbaked macaron shells. You need to bake your macarons until it's completely cooked. You know, like I said, this is why the reason I said I prefer overbaked macarons on versus underbaked, because with underbaked macarons, there's not much you can do about it. And if you notice you bring it out and you notice they're like slightly underbaked, don't be afraid to put it back. You can just put it back and for a couple more minutes, unless they're cooled completely, right? Make sure also to bake one tray at a time. So what happens is sometimes people add 2 trays at the same time. You can do that, but you need to halfway through you need to swap it out so that the tray that was on top will go on the bottom, because when you do two trays at the same time, your heat source from the bottom doesn't reach the top baking sheet, so your top baking sheet doesn't get enough heat from the bottom, so they are underbaked from the bottom. And now your bottom baking sheet won't get enough heat from the top, so they will be overbaked on the bottom, underbaked on the top. So, but the best bet is to bake it one sheet at a time. Okay, so I think this is it. This are the most commonly asked issues that people have with macarons. And if you have any questions, you can go to my website, and under this troubleshooting post, you can leave your question and issues, and we can troubleshoot together. Give me as much details as you can. That's it. Thank you so much for watching, and if you learned anything new, please comment below. I love hearing from you, and I hope you enjoy a perfect macaron. I'm gonna have my tea and eat some macarons. By the way, if you are wondering what is perfect macaron is nice and smooth shells with a ruffled feet. It doesn't matter what kind of feet it is. Some people have opinionated about this, but you know, any kind of feet, ruffled feet is good enough. And you want to have perfect filling, and yeah, and it should be full inside, right? So hope you enjoy it.